But first, John Stemberger is here. He's with the Florida Family Policy Council. I read something that he wrote recently about Trump and the evangelical vote. Now, why is the evangelical vote so talked about in Republican circles? Before we bring John on, just a couple of setups here. In the 2012 Republican presidential primary nationally, CBS News did an exit poll study and found that around 52% of all voters in the Republican presidential primary 4 years ago identified as either evangelicals or born-again Christians. In Iowa, the turnout of evangelicals in the 2008 Iowa caucuses was about 62%. It was a little over 58% 4 years ago. So you're talking about almost 2/3 of the vote. It's even higher in the South Carolina primary. It was 65% in 2012. So you're dealing with what is the largest subset of the Republican base across the country are evangelical voters. If you want to know the difference between Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan, beyond Reagan had a winsome quality in his character that Barry Goldwater did not. But Ronald Reagan also had a third leg of the stool Barry Goldwater did not. We had not seen yet the emergence of the Christian conservative movement, the alliance of faithful Catholics and evangelical Christians that provided that grassroots army. Barry Goldwater did not have that in 1964. Ronald Reagan did, and changed the electoral landscape in that watershed election of 1980. So for those of you wondering, listening around the country here tonight, that's why there's so much focus on this particular demographic. So, John, with that as a setup, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Hey, it's great to be with you.
So why focus particularly on Trump in the evangelical vote, John?
Well, it's one thing if you're going to do something with your eyes open and you understand the nature and character of what you're voting for and who this man is and what he stands for. It's another thing if you're just completely ignorant. And I am stunned that Christians would reach for a man who I think objectively is the most immoral, ungodly, worldly man we've ever seen, ever elected to office anywhere, even proposed. And to think that he would do that, to have a thrice married casino owner whose wife has posed nude openly, and they're proud about it. They have no problem with these things, right? It's not like it's in their past and they've had some kind of an experience. For evangelicals to choose that kind of a candidate seems really odd to me. And so my thing is, look, if you're going to do it, that's fine, but you need to know the facts about what this man stands for. I mean, this is a guy who openly uses the F word in such a way and other vulgarities, not just cursing, I'm talking about profanity, obscenities that couldn't even be aired on the FCC. And so there's a real issue here. I think evangelicals need to wake up. I understand they're angry, but it reminds me of the scripture that says the anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God. We need to open our eyes about who this man is, what he said. Just his statements on women alone, Steve, is a practical matter. Can you imagine the campaign commercials against Hillary Clinton when he's called, women the kind of vulgar things he's called them? I mean, it's going to be a bloodbath.
Now, as you know, John, I'm on the ground here in a state where the Jesus freaks like you and I dominate. I don't see any evidence. I read one poll yesterday had Trump getting 28% of the evangelical vote. I see no evidence of this on the ground. And I don't know, between me and a mutual friend of ours, Bob Vanderplatz, I don't know too many people in Iowa that have more connections to the evangelical political community in this state than he and I do. And I don't see any evidence of this phenomenon, at least not in Iowa at all. I just don't. I don't see it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the polling is pretty clear. Now, whether or not the polling's accurate or not, but people are self-identifying as evangelicals and saying they're going to be in favor of Trump. Certainly I see it in terms of anecdotal stuff, online media and the network that I have nationwide. And I do agree that most evangelicals that are ministry-minded get it, but there's a lot of people that would say that they're Christians, would say that they're born-again Christians that still think, we need to kind of burn the house and start over again. I mean, this would be a huge mistake. And not only would we lose the general election, but it would be an embarrassment for the Republican Party as well.
I want to get into the general election stuff before we get into specifics about Trump and where he's at in those issues. And I want to say this in the interest of full disclosure. I know some of the people with Team Trump, Donald Trump's been kind to me, even though I don't want him to be the nominee, because I think he's a progressive. And some of the issues that John has already raised. For a long time, I was fine with being sympathetic. If he I'm also not somebody, if someone wants to be my friend, I don't see a need to nuke them, at least immediately, but give them at least time to prove whether the relationship is sincere. The more this goes on, I think it's pretty clear that Trump is like most politicians, despite claiming to be not like most politicians. He's willing to take conservatives and evangelicals on his terms and not ours. I think we've had enough of that, though, when it comes to the GOP establishment. We've heard all those speeches and everything before. And so, this summer, I had an opportunity to go with them. And my wife and I thought about it and decided not to do it. And the reason we ultimately decided not to do it is, as angry as we are at the Republican Party, I don't know, you can get more burn it down, John, than we are on this show. My faith compels me to be a part of something other than storming the Bastille. I've got a higher ethic I am called to, right, other than venting, exactly right, other than a tantrum. And so I gave the Trump team a test, John. And the test was, it was this summer, and Donald had just was about to go out to California to do his first, and Arizona to do his first immigration rallies. And I said, hey, while you're out there, take that Trump plane right up to Oregon, to Aaron and Melissa Klein, and start a crowdfunding campaign for them to bail them out of their situation. And you cut the first check, because $135,000 to Donald is, like pocket change to you and me, John. And send a signal that you really want us as a bloc. That this isn't, we're not pandering. We didn't just find one hot button issue and we're going to pander on it and play it up, but that you sincerely want to represent making America great again. And you're going to defend our very first freedom. That went nowhere, and those conversations ended, and that's when my wife and I decided, this guy, as much as we like some of what he is saying, in the end, he's going to put us in a position of having to defend the indefensible, and I don't want to do that for a living. I watched Katrina Pearson last night on television, who's been on our show before. She came up through the ranks as a Tea Party activist for Ted Cruz in his 2012 Senate run, who's now taken a paycheck from Donald Trump, and she's beyond just shilling and spinning. She's saying stuff like Cruz isn't a citizen, not a natural born citizen, when just a few months ago she knew that he was and was saying that he was. And the point is, that's what this candidacy is going to make people of principle to do. And I just can't bring myself to do it, John. And whatever Katrina Pearson's getting paid for it, I hope it's up front, and I hope it's a lot of money, enough to help you go to sleep at night before you tuck yourself in.
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of that. I know that there's clearly people that he quote unquote bought, but for the money he's been able to provide may not have worked in his campaign, and it's just unfortunate. I mean, if we have to hold our nose, I tell you what, you talk about people staying home. I think if he is elected, or if he's the nominee, we will legitimately see literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of evangelicals have a true crisis of conscience and wonder, can we even do this? I mean, I can tell you right now, there's major national evangelical organizations that are policy oriented.
I know this is true.
They're going to choke.
I know.
So it will not be pretty at all. It just is a practical matter in terms of trying to win this election.
I think if you look at it, since 1980, I wrote about this for Conservative Review a couple of months back, John. Since 1980, every Republican presidential victory, except for George W. Bush's in 2000 when he won without the popular vote, so that's an outlier. Since 1980, they all have three things in common. Number one, the candidate was the one who energized evangelicals in the primary. Number two, he won the Catholic vote in the general. And number three, he won the middle class vote in the general. When we come back, I want to talk about those three things and why I think, at the very least, if Trump were the nominee, he'd have to create an entirely new political constituency to do it. We'll do that with John Stemberger of the Florida Family Policy Council in a moment.